here with Marjorie Cavanaugh, a 78-year-old veteran of the Korean War, and she has very generously consented to tell us her story for the Veterans Oral History Project. We are at the Veterans Administration Medical Center in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I am Susan Tracy, a volunteer with the project, and I am on the camera. And at this point I will turn over the show to Marjorie, and she'll take us through her wonderful experience with the Korean War. So, there you go.
The name that I enlisted in the Women's Army Corps under was Marjorie Elizabeth Underwood. That was my maiden name. I was born in Somersville, Connecticut on August 27th, 1932. I was the third oldest of 10 children, 7 girls and 3 boys. You can
look this way if you want. It makes you comfortable.
I have always been very, very interested in history. I would read biographies and stories about different lands and different occurrences. And when I was asked to do this, I realized that my experiences as a woman in the Army, one of the first women in the Women's Army Corps, was actually part of history. And that is one of the reasons that I agreed to do this. I cannot believe that it has been 60 years since I joined the military. The years have gone by very, very quickly, as did the time that I was in the Army. I enlisted in the Women's Army Corps because I was actually very patriotic, but that really wasn't my primary reason. When I look back on it, I realized how much that influenced me. But because I was a child of World War II and Franklin Delano Roosevelt was my hero, and but I wanted an education. No one in my family had ever graduated from high school. I was the first one. But because I came from a large family, there was no way I was going to be able to go on to college. And the recruiter promised me that I would receive an education after I fulfilled my military obligation. So that was the primary reason. I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia for basic training. It was not as difficult for me as it was for a lot of the women that were there, because I had been kind of independent, and I had to take orders at home. My parents were very strict, so it wasn't, basic training was not all that difficult for me. I do remember going out on bivouac for 3 days and not taking my bedroll apart because I didn't want to not pass inspection the next day, so I froze for 2 nights. I do remember that. But on the whole, basic training was very good for me and for the other women that were there.
Were some women dropping out or flunking out?
I didn't see any. If they did, none of my barracks did. No, they did not. They stayed. A lot of them were from families that were actually poverty stricken. They did not have, and they did not have very much. So the $80 a month that we received as pay was a huge sum to most of the women. We had only one girl who came from a military family, and that's why she was had joined. Her father was a colonel, and so she joined because he wanted her to. She did drop out.
Ooh.
She did drop out.
Interesting family dynamics at home that night.
Right, I imagine.
And did some of the girls have brothers who had enlisted or were getting ready to go to Korea?
I don't know. None of them that I knew, or if they told me, I have forgotten it. But most of them were recruited more than having a military reason for joining. Most of them were recruited.
Recruited by?
Army recruiters. Yes, they had a very large network of recruiters, and they would come into the towns. They would go to the schools. They were very active, and that was the way they got their volunteers.
And they were actively recruiting the women too.
Right, yeah. I was chosen after basic training to go to leaders school. Now, I really do not know what the qualifications were that I would go to school like that. But while I was there, I was also chosen to take the officer candidate test, which I must have failed because I didn't go to officer candidate school. But I did have 2 more months of training at Fort Lee at Leaders School. When I left Leaders School, I was assigned to an Army Air Base at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and became the Operations NCO. I don't know why, because I had no specific skills, but I did run the operations. I would call flight plans in and give the pilots their instructions. I did all of that. I was in charge of the base. So.
Can I go back to leader school for a moment?
Yes.
What was different about the training in leader school? How were they training you? What kinds of things would you do in leader school?
They were actually training us in handling people. I think maybe they were training you to be to actually be the trainers for basic training, and but also they were looking for officer candidates, especially women.
And your trainers in basic school and at training school, were they men or women?
All women.
All women?
There were no men.
All the way through?
We had no men.
So your drill instructors were
Yeah.
women?
We did have men when we went to the firing range for to learn to fire the rifles, but they did not. They actually worked through our women officers.
And would you go to the firing range to the same extent that the guys would be using it, or
no.
this was
No,
very
no.
brief?
It was very, very brief. 1 or 2 days we went to the firing range, and that was it. They did not really expect us to use the weapons, but it was part of the training. We had to have the training. So, I will say that for leader school, I was the only one chosen to take the officer candidate test. So there had to be another reason for them to send women to leader school. But I just did what they told me to do. So,
That's what you were supposed to do.
yeah. I really liked being in the Army. I think it's because I'm a Virgo, and Virgos like order and I liked the military life. We worked very hard until Saturday afternoon, and then we're given leave from Saturday afternoon till Sunday night if we didn't get any demerits. And there were social activities on the post, and there was a town right next to Fort Belvoir, that Alexandria, which we would go to. I really did enjoy being in the military.
So you would socialize with other guys on the base? That was allowed?
There was, Fort Lee also had men who were taking basic training. Saturday night they would have a dance, and you would go up and socialize. Very strict, very well supervised.
Yeah, chaperone doesn't, the word doesn't fit in the military, but supervised
very well
works.
supervised and enjoyable. We would go to the canteens. We were allowed to go there, especially after payday. We'd have money so we could go. So there was,
but for meals, would you eat just with the women?
Oh, yes.
What was the day-to-day?
Yeah, yes.
Day-to-day you were separate?
Yeah. Oh, we the only time we ever saw any of the men was at a dance. We did not see them during the day. No, it was in two entirely different camps. Yeah. And our free time, there really wasn't much of it. We did not have much. Like, we'd be through the regular routine of the day. You spent time polishing your shoes and making sure that there was, your footlocker was absolutely just, it had to be just so. So that's what, we didn't have a lot of free time. And of course, we didn't have television, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have all of those things, which were distractions. But we would go out at night sometimes after, if we had a free evening, we played softball. We did things outside, just walk around. Recreation was there wasn't a lot of it, but we enjoyed being with each other. And we'd have competitions between the barracks for different things. And then always, every Saturday morning, we had a parade. And you would have to march. We marched. All of the different divisions would march. And that was, after the parade, we were free. So everybody liked the parades. We had very strict officers. They were very, very strict with us. I can remember one incident when it was not done on purpose. They thought it was, but we were told that if someone walked into a room with with an insignia on their hat, that was an officer, and you would call attention. What they didn't tell us was that some of the non-commissioned officers had a little badge on their hat that signified the branch or what specialists they were. And so one of them walked in, and I hollered attention, and I actually did scrub the toilet bowl with a toothbrush. I actually did that as my punishment. So I had mentioned that I was going to tell you about, that reminded me about this, that I was going to tell you about my enlistment procedure. You had to pass a physical, which included an eye test, and I really think they wanted me to join because I had to take the eye test without my glasses. You had to have a certain vision without your glasses, and I could not see the chart. So the doctor that was giving the test told me to move up to that line. And when she did, I put my glasses on and said, "What line?" And while I had my glasses on, I memorized the eye chart. And so when I took my glasses off, I passed it with flying colors. But I cheated a little bit so that I could get in. But I didn't cheat any, after that, that was the only thing
That was the
I
only
did.
cheating,
The
huh?
only cheating I did. I had,
Now, going back, you said you had to pass the physical and you had to read and write.
yes,
But you also said the Women's Army Corps, you did not have to have graduated from high school.
that's right. You did not have to graduate. You just had to be able to pass. They gave you a test, and you had to be able to pass the test, which was very, very simple.
What's an example of something on the test?
I can't remember. I can't remember. It was, for me, taking tests was always very easy. So this one, maybe for me it was easy, for someone else it was more difficult. But I just remember it as a very, very easy
Simple
test.
test.
Yeah, yeah. And physically, you had to be physically fit. So they did give you a physical.
Did you have a physical fitness test as part of it?
Not like they have now. No,
Yeah.
no. You just go, do you have a heart? Do you have a heart? It's beating? Yes, that's it. That was about the size of it.
And did you feel, in basic training, did you think the physical exercise component, the getting fit component was difficult? And
Oh,
how-
yes, yes.
So
And
across the board for all the women?
yes,
The
and I
running
was,
and what
yeah,
kinds of things
and I
did you
was
do?
physically fit too. But yes, it is very demanding. It was, I would fall into bed at night exhausted from it, and look forward to meals because I could never get enough food. And even though we all ate very, very well, I lost weight. What I did was I became firmer, had more muscle. It was very demanding, and they almost, I think that probably some of the programs they had for men, they just said, okay, the women are going to do this too. So yes, we did. It was very demanding.
Did they have an obstacle course that the women had to do?
Yes, we
then?
did. We did an obstacle course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think was the longest run you did?
Oh, I have no idea. I can't remember. Some of them seemed forever, but I really do not know. And I do know that most of the women were much more physically fit now than because we were all much more active then. I did walk to school, and but I'm trying to remember, maybe we'd have to run a mile or two. I remember one hike that was kind of up a mountainside, and it was October when I went into the service, but down in Virginia in October it's very, very warm. So that was a grueling time. I think I developed a blister, which made it even worse. But we still had to do it, and we did it. Yeah.
I was thinking about women in basic training, and were there some of the women who had problems with menstrual cycles and cramps? Or
We did not talk about that.
you didn't talk about that at all.
We did not. No. Your personal hygiene was your own, and we just did not talk the way they it's on TV now.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
Everyone,
Right.
but no, that was a personal thing. So you just didn't. If you had it, you might talk to a nurse, but you did not.
Could you keep like aspirin? Could you have
No.
medication at all
No.
in your personal locker area?
I don't think it occurred to us to do it, to have that. You just didn't know about all of those things, so I don't think. But I don't remember any of them, any of the girls having any of that. No, I know I didn't. So, yeah. No, we just, you toughed it out.
You toughed it out.
That's what you did.
That was the expectation when
Yeah,
you went in.
you toughed it out.
So the women that could handle that would
Yeah.
gravitate toward
Yeah.
the situation.
But if you were sick or anything, you got to go to the nurse, and then, yeah. But I don't think very many of them went. You know, no.
Like with the men, if there was something wrong and you missed a week, would you have to get recycled and go back to the next basic school class? Or?
I think so. Either that or you were just discharged.
Yeah.
You were just discharged. You didn't get a second chance.
Now, while this is all happening, are your instructors talking about the potential to go to Korea? Were they putting all of this training in the context of the Korean War?
No, they were putting it in the context that you could be in combat, but not specifically the Korean War. They were preparing us for combat, but it wasn't said specifically that you would go to Korea.
Mm-hmm. Was that in the back of everyone's minds?
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course it was. Yes.
Because I would think the guys you're dancing with on Saturday night,
Yeah.
that's where they are going.
Yeah. Actually, I think some of the women were actually wanting to go.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to go. And but we also realized that we had no say in the matter. We went where they told us to go, and we did what they told us to do.
So when you finished the basic training in leadership school, did you fill out any kind of a military specialty choice sheet that you'd like to do
No.
secretarial, or you'd
No.
like to do?
When you enlisted, that was part of the sheet, your background.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what they did more than anything else was just use your background. That would save them from training. And if you had taken what we call the commercial course in high school, and if you knew how to type, and you went to the secretarial pool. If you whatever else it was, that's what they did. They did not ask you what you wanted. No, no, they did not.
And what was your sense of the different jobs that the women moved off to in your?
Most of the jobs that women moved to were secretarial. The jobs that I thought I was kind of fortunate to have something that was a little bit different than the ordinary ones. My best friend when I was there, her name was Mitsui Tamashiro, and Mitsui was assigned to the air base the same way that I was, the same place. We used to ride there.
Fort Belvoir too.
Yeah, we used to ride to the air base together because it was outside of the actual base. But Mitzi was assigned as a secretary to the parts, the tools, to the maintenance part as a secretary, whereas I got to be the operations NCO for the flight. So, but those were, and it was the medical field. It was the medical field and the secretarial, and that's about it. That was about it.
Were the nurses in basic training with you?
No, the nurses were considered officers, and they went to officer training. Yeah, they did not. No, the medics were
with you.
Were enlisted, so they came with us.
Yep. And you said there were women medics.
Yes.
In your group.
Oh, yes.
So that was one of the specialties.
Yeah, my sister was a woman medic. Yeah. And she received her training in the service. But when I say that they looked on the background, my sister had worked at the state hospital as a medic. As an aide. So her background was, she had a little medical background, so they sent her there. So this is what they emphasized, what your past was, and they used it. Yeah.
Is this a good place to talk more about your sister?
Oh,
because that's certainly a special part of your story.
When I had been enlisted, and my sister and my mother and father, two of my sisters, my mother and father came to visit me while I was at basic training, and I think that was the time when my younger sister Pat she's 2 years younger than I, decided that she wanted to come into the Army too and join me. She did. She joined the Army as soon as she turned 18 and went to basic training and then was sent to Fort Ord, California, to be trained as a medic.
A long way from home, since you grew up in
as
Monson,
right. And while she was out there, she requested a transfer to Fort Belvoir, where I had been stationed, to be with me, and it was granted. So my sister came to Fort Belvoir, I think probably in the spring of '52, in the spring, early summer of 1952, and was stationed with me until I was discharged in October of '53. And I stayed in Washington, D.C. and worked in Washington, D.C. until my sister was discharged. So I think I was very fortunate in that my sister was stationed with me, and I don't know why they allowed it, but they did, and I was very, very glad. But she and I had been very close, always been very close growing up, and she just wanted to join the Army to be with me. So
now she was a medic.
Yes.
And what would she be doing at Fort Belvoir as a medic?
There was an Army hospital there, and she just worked at the Army hospital. She was, say medic, that was a glamorized term, I think, but she was actually like a nurse's aide. That's what she did. She did the grunt work, the making the beds and doing all the things that. But they did have some medical experience. So, but that's what she did.
Now, did you have, when you learned the operations side of your job at Fort Belvoir, that was on-the-job training once you got there?
Yeah. Actually, one of the pilots was the one that did the training. I had a Major George, who was the commanding officer of the air base, and he helped train me. I think a lot of it was do it and learn as you go along, and I really did like the job. One of the things I had to do outside, you didn't just do one job. I had to inspect the parachutes. Now
it's an important job.
In this day and age, you would never get somebody who just, you'd have to have a specialist who checked everything. But I knew what to do, and I knew if there was something that wasn't quite put back, I knew where to put it. So I would do that. Yeah, it was one of the things that I did.
What were some of the other things that you were doing?
I used to call in the flight plans to the air control. And I know that there is a new phonetic system now, but I still remember April, Baker, Charlie. Those were the words that we used. And I made the flight plans. I did the schedules for the pilots, where they each had to have a certain number of hours in the air, and I would do the scheduling so that they got their required hours in, and that involved the fact that there were some flights that they did, and then if there were hours left over, I'd have to schedule them for. And which plane we had small planes. We didn't have any big planes, and we had a lot of helicopters. We used to fly into Washington, D.C. and mostly fly VIPs. Eisenhower's brother was one of them, and I remember flying quite a bit. And they would make short hops all over the country. And they did fly into Westover quite a bit. That was a good flight for them, the time frame to make up the hours that they needed. That was the other thing that I did. And any letters that had to go out, any letters that were, I would do the letters. I kept the logs for the flights. I did all those things.
Now, were there any other women working with you?
No,
Who,
no.
who made up the office you were in?
Me.
Me.
Me and the pilots. That's all that were there. And we had Major George, who was the commanding officer of the airfield. We had let's see, I'm trying to remember exactly. I think we had 6 other pilots besides Major George. Major George didn't fly as much. He flew his required hours mostly, but he did the whatever was the commanding officer's duties. So I was actually his secretary too, as well. So.
What was the attitude, do you think, of that group of pilots toward the war? Were they anxious to go over to Korea? Were they glad they weren't in Korea?
No, I think they were very happy that they were young. They were not much older than I was, and they were. I remember Lieutenant Rutherford had just been married and had a child, and he was not anxious to go anywhere. No, I don't think they talked about it, but it was almost as if, okay, let's make sure, let's hope that none of us end up going over there. And they all stayed, they were all still at Belleville when I left. So none of them got transferred over. They were considered, because it was right outside of Washington, D.C., they were considered essential, so they didn't get shipped out.
Essential to move the brass around from place to place.
Yeah, so they did not get shipped.
Now, was the action in Korea part of people's conversations? Did you get stars and stripes, so battles were being followed, or?
Yeah, it was part of the conversation. There's no question about it. But it wasn't, at least for me, a part of our daily living. It's like now in Iraq and Afghanistan, you get daily reports on the news. They did not do that. They didn't do that. So we didn't get, sometimes the news that we would get would be weeks old. So it was not really part of our day-to-day living. As hard as it is to realize, you have to remember that communication now is much quicker and very, very different than back then.
Letters were the...
Yeah, letters. Yeah, but we were aware that we were at war and that there was a possibility that any one of us could be sent to Korea. So we knew that.
Yeah. How about when MacArthur was relieved? Do you remember any of all of that controversy?
I remember that. I do remember it. And sometimes we were all kind of disappointed because we liked him. He was very arrogant, I think, but also very colorful. And he had saved the Philippines, so he was a hero. So no, we were not thrilled with the fact that he took him away. So, yeah, no, I remember that very well.
How did you find out about all of that? Do you remember that?
Was it probably a newspaper or on the radio? We listened to the radio quite a bit, and we got a lot of news on the radio. So, and also there would be newspapers. We had a general room at Belvoir that was our recreation room.
In a women's barracks?
And they would provide newspapers, and we were allowed to have radios, so we had radios. This was when we were actually working, not during basic or anything, but when we were working, we were allowed to have radios. Yep. And so that's the way we got most of our information.
That would have been all over the radio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And as I say, we were not thrilled. Okay. At least the group that I was with wasn't.
Yeah. So. Now, was the bits and pieces you did get, was the sense that we were winning? Did people have a sense it was a stalemate?
We did not get the sense that we were winning. No, we did not. And I think, as the American public did not want us over there, I don't think that the military wanted us over there either. There was a lot of confusion, I think, about why we were there, and it trickled down to all of us. But we also felt, I think, that we had no business there, that it wasn't our business, that we were interfering with another country, and that we shouldn't be there. So there was not an enthusiasm, is that the word? Like World War II, there was not a person in this country, I don't think, that didn't think that we should be where we were. But this was entirely different. And so we were hoping that it would be over, and just get over, and we would get out of there.
And if you want to talk a little bit here, you mentioned the reception that the Korean veterans received when they came home. I think that's a very interesting piece of our history that we don't know very much about.
There was parades, there was dancing in the street, there was fireworks, all of that after World War II. The veterans from World War II were welcomed home, they were honored. When the Korean War ended and the veterans came home, they were, to use an expression of the time, given the cold shoulder. People didn't even want to acknowledge that they had been out fighting for the country. When my sister and I were discharged, we went back home and we joined the American Legion Post 130 in Palmer. And there was a coming together, because we were all of that group that had been almost ostracized, because we had been involved in it. There were no thank yous. There was absolutely no. There was no celebration. There was no anything. I can understand the feelings of not wanting to be involved in Korea. I cannot and will never understand the feelings of the American people towards the individual soldiers. They were doing what they thought was the right thing. Maybe it was the only way that they could protest, the American people could protest against it, but it was not right. And it actually brought the Korean veterans closer together, closer to each other than if they had been welcomed home. But no, they were not. They were not. There was nothing. No. And especially a woman Korean veteran, that was adding insult to injury.
Yeah. What was your experience of that?
Well, to be a woman and have been in the Army in the first place was considered demeaning. Good, quote, girls did not go into the Army. They were considered trash. So, because there were two of us, I was very glad, because I had my sister, and some of the remarks that were made were not at all flattering or nice, because there was language in those days to describe, but I'm not going to use it. Girls like us, we were no good. That's all there was to it. And to be on top of it, to be a Korean veteran, made us twice as bad. So there was more resentment, more vocal words against us because we were both women and Korean veterans.
And who was sending those messages?
A lot of it were other women. A lot of it were men who were not veterans, who had not been in, who just took it for granted that this was an easy woman, and in general, they were looked down on.
Would there be articles written in newspapers, or would you hear people on the radio making the derogatory?
Yes, we especially the radio, but they were couched. The terms were sugar coated, because but you knew what they were implying. You know, yeah.
Now,
let me give you an example. When I went to UMass to enroll, because I was told at the time you had to be interviewed by the chancellor. It was a much smaller school, and he told me that I was taking a man's place, and I should not be doing this. Okay, so
and what did you respond?
I think it devastated me that I had been doing all of this because I wanted an education, and then to have a man tell me I was taking I think I made the remark that there was room for all of us there, but it devastated me. It really made me think twice about going there.
And what was your next step?
I ended up not going. I did. I ended up not going. And so for all of the, I did enroll, but every step of the way there was an obstacle. So I ended up not doing it, in spite of the fact that that was my original intent. In this day, that would not happen, but in that day, it did. I met obstacle after obstacle. So.
And what was your reaction of your family around you?
My family.
Had they been supportive of going in the beginning, and then?
Oh yeah, but my father went with me to the university. But my father was old school. My father had gone to 5th grade, I believe, and felt that I, as a woman, had a high school education, so I had a good deal more education. I had enough that it really wasn't absolutely necessary for me to go on further to school. I think I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach more than anything, and I actually think that it was my father would have supported me if I had gone, but they were still kids at home and still other things, so it wasn't the most important thing in the world for them.
Now, when you went into the Army, did you know that attitude existed about women in the service?
I didn't really think that there was any obstacle or anything that was going to stand in my way for any reason. I had always, growing up, been able to do what I wanted to do and all, and so no, I wasn't aware of this, and I did because if I wanted to do something, I did it, but no. I don't know if I would have even gone to the university if I thought this was the attitude. I thought that they were going to welcome me because I was there under the GI Bill. So, but there were a lot there under the GI Bill. So they and I think they only had so many slots, so the man was the breadwinner, the woman stayed home. So I shouldn't take a man's place, but no. And I am surprised now that I look back on it that I gave up, because I usually didn't give up, but I did then. Can we stop for a minute?
Absolutely.
Because I need...
All right, well, we're back in action.
Okay.
And I, just to catch up the tape here, I was wondering what the attitude toward women was while you're in your time in service, given what it was like when you left.
Whenever my sister and I came home on leave, we received a lot of attention. Women in uniform were rare. You didn't see them, and most of the people that we were in contact with were positive about it. When we would go to Alexandria, it was Alexandria, Virginia, on a pass going leave the base. The people there were very, very nice. No one would shun us because we were women. A lot of their economy depended upon the base, so we did not. Don't remember running into a particular prejudice or anything from.
How about the attitudes of the men with whom you worked?
The ones where we worked, they treated us, at least where I worked, they treated me very well. They were very, you have to remember, I was the only enlisted person working with a good number of officers. And the officers always treated me fairly, but I was enlisted, and there's a fine line there between the enlisted and the officers. I don't know if that line is still as strong now as it was then, but there was a caste system. Yeah, so, but they treated me very well.
Now, were you aware of instances? Would you women talk about? I assume there must have been sexual harassment or worse at some different points. Yeah. I know it's a lot more prevalent.
Well, someone asked me, well, when I go to the VA, I think I have to answer that periodically. I don't remember any sexual harassment. I did get one time we had a black driver that used to drive us from our barracks to the airfield, and he was very upset because I sat in the back seat rather than in the front seat, and he insisted that I had to sit in the front seat, and I wouldn't do it. So that was the only thing, and I don't know if that's considered, it was harassment, but I'm not sure it was sexual. I think it was just him. And the other girls, at least in my barracks, I don't remember anyone.
Do you think they would have shared that?
They might have thought it was their fault, because we live in such a different age than we do.
Battle still today, but certainly in the 50s.
So yeah, they might have thought that they asked, what they say, they asked for it, or it was their fault. I do know that one of the girls was dating a colonel who was married, and she said she was dating him because he was her boss. Now, that might have been, it might have been because she wanted to, or because she felt she had to, but
There wasn't any discussion, no workshops about sexual harassment or.
there were we didn't even talk sex.
Right.
We did not.
Yeah.
You just didn't do it, you know.
They weren't handing out condoms to the women.
Oh,
You
no.
weren't watching the VD films?
No, they weren't. I think each woman was supposed to take care of herself, and if something happened, I don't really think that they would have talked about it. They just did not talk. Oh, we talked, like girls talk. We always do, but 90% of us didn't know what we were talking about. So, but I really did not get the feeling that anyone had been molested or sexually harassed. Yeah.
How about the armed services being integrated? What was your experience of that
My
new
barracks
scenario?
was integrated, and I had I had grown up in a town with no. Is the term Negro still able? Are we still able to use that? Because that's what we call Negro.
Yeah, there weren't blacks.
Yeah. And when I went in the service, to me they were no different. They were people just like me. They were recruits just like me. What happened was like went with like. That's what happened. There were quite a few Spanish girls that kind of stayed together. There were some black girls that stayed together, and then there were different. There was the South too. There were girls from the South and girls from the North, and they tended to stay together. We worked as a team. The whole barracks had to work as a team, so we worked as a team. But there was this separation. I don't think it was intended. I think it just happened because people tended to go where they were comfortable.
People that know your experience.
Yeah, but I don't think. And I was very upset with the idea of segregation. At one point, I had flown to Atlanta, Georgia, with one of the pilots because I could do that, And we stopped in an airport, and I think it was the first time I had seen black bathrooms and white bathrooms, and I was outraged. I said, "I'm going to the black bathroom." And it was Lieutenant Rutherford, and Lieutenant Rutherford says, "No, don't do that. Don't do that. You won't accomplish anything. You'll just make it more difficult. Don't do that." But I was outraged because I didn't think it was right, and so.
Would you hear any of the other women appalled by the integration?
The Southern girls,
All right, yeah.
They weren't appalled. There was a certain way that they treated the others, and that was it. It was like, I'm here and you're here, but I'm much better than you are. That was the attitude, and
they'd have that toward someone who was black, not necessarily a Yankee.
Yeah, towards someone who was black. And that attitude was there. And we had black officers too, and I think there was some difficulty with some of them with taking orders from the black officers. And I have no question in my mind that they did have difficulty with it. They had no choice. They had to take them, but they didn't like it.
Now, were there workshops or presentations that helped people through these issues, or just this is the rule?
No.
Act it out, do it.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There was none. You just adjusted on your own. You either fit in or you didn't. And then you just did whatever else you had to do. But no. Nowadays, it seems as though there's a workshop or there's something for everything, I think. And I actually, when I look back on it, think that the way we did it wasn't a bad way, because we learned to live with each other, and it was up to us to do the learning process, and I think we did it quite well. By the time we were through with basic training, we were friends with a good deal of the other girls, and it didn't matter whether they were white, black, or blue. Like I said, my best friend was named Mitsui Tamashiro. She was from Hawaii. She was part Japanese, part something else. She and I just got along. And when Mitsui had an arranged marriage to go back home to, the marriage was all arranged, but they had allowed her to join the military because it was a good thing for them. The family had said that it was okay, so she had to have her family's permission. And Mitsui left, was discharged the same time I was, and went back home to Hawaii to a marriage. I've tried and tried to contact her and haven't been able to. So like I say, when I first went in, I would never have thought that she would have been my friend, but she was.
It clicked.
Yeah.
Who were your role models on how you worked through basic training? How you learned to function in the Army?
Several officers that I admired, and because I had always, I loved my mother, but I also admired my mother. And there were two officers especially that seemed to be like my mother. And I wanted very much to please them, to do what they expected of me. So I think that they were my role. And also Sergeant Falcone. We had one sergeant who was very, very strict. Very, very strict. But she used to laugh at my jokes. And so I liked Sergeant Falcone. And because of their attitudes and because of the way they treated us, we wanted to please them. So right then and there, those were the role models for basic and for leader school.
Well, I see the time, and we're almost out. And on that note of your role models, I'd like to say that you certainly are a role model for the rest of us, thinking about our women's history and our women's role, and I hope you get to spend time with the young women veterans that are coming out now.
I try
because
to.
That would be you
will
would be a wonderful role model for them.
I try to. Yeah. But I was the first woman commander of the American Legion Post in Palmer, and I did it again to say, you can do it. Yeah. Women can do it.
It's a wonderful
and
message.
I'm very, very pleased to see how much they're doing now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. Well, it's a good place to end, and I thank you very, very heartily for sharing your story and your time. And it's an important story to have in these archives.
Yeah,
it's a treasure.
I wish I could actually take everyone back to a day in the life of a recruit at Fort Lee, Virginia. I actually also think that it wouldn't hurt in this day and age for every teenager to have a month of some sort of a training like that.
That's right.
But it's been a pleasure, and I thank you for allowing me.
Yeah, I could listen to your stories for another couple of hours. And let me I'm going to